Again, it's good to see everyone out today. We're going to start on a line of study that really is going to take a lot of effort on your part, because the whole goal is not for me to tell you everything. The whole goal is for you to see things for yourself. And so what ends up happening is that many times we think we know a whole lot. And so I'm asking everybody, just hold your comments for a second. We always think we know more. And I'm saying this, I'm not saying this to people that are new to this. I'm saying this to brethren that have been in the church for a long time. We think we know some things, and we never take the time to really look at it. So before we get too excited and loud about everything, think we understand everything, listen to what I'm trying to explain. Because one of my biggest frustrations that I have as a minister is trying to fix what brethren mess up trying to talk to other people. And I'm not even talking about what you're saying, it's how you say stuff sometimes. Because if you're not communicating in a fashion they can understand and they can actually receive, you're still not communicating. You're just talking. And so we need to make sure you understand. And the reason I want us to all understand these things, because there's a lot of debate that's been happening concerning music in the church, and it's been going on for a long time. So let me just tell you where I stood on this one, just so you get this. You see, I was actually raised in the church. I never knew that there was a problem because I didn't go visit other places. And what we have to understand is that it was certain things that just made sense to me based on the things that I could see in the scriptures and the things that I could not see in the scriptures. Now, granted, as a young man, I just actually took these things to heart. But I'm going to tell you something. It wasn't until I decided to go further in depth that I truly understood why it was a certain way. And I say this just so we get it, okay? So what the whole goal is this, and also what I need to do, and I'm saying this not to try to put anybody on the spot. I need everybody to keep their voices down because this is being recorded. And I need other people that want to actually do this exact same study, because I'm helping other brethren that ask me for the notes on this also, so they can understand this whole program. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the work in. The work we're going to put in is that we're going to read every single verse in the Bible that has anything to do with music. And what we're going to do is and there's a reason why we're doing it. Because our whole goal as we study is not scriptural music, okay? Think about this. There's a difference here. The whole goal of this study is not scriptural music. The goal of this study is music in the scriptures. Because when you take the time to look at music in the scriptures, you'll come to understand some things that you may not have understood before. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of times, here's the way the conversation goes. Here's the way the conversation goes, okay? Hey, why don't you guys over there in the Church of Christ believe in music? And we'll say, like, we do believe in music. What are you talking about? He said, well, you guys don't actually have no instrumental music in your worship. And we say, well, because we don't believe that the New Testament authorized instrumental music. And then the rebuttal would be like, well, the Old Testament is full of all kind of musical instruments. And then we'll say, well, that may be true, but the New Testament does not give any authorization for instrumental music. Now, here's the point I want to try to make here. Even though you may say, and I'm talking from the standpoint of people who are having this conversation, even though you may say, yeah, the Old Testament is full of all kind of musical instruments, you're making a statement that that I know you never looked at to back up. Because if you ever took the time to look at it, you would make the statement differently. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that there's something that many people have never taken the time to look at. You see, we always try to think that when people who are very, very sincere cannot understand the problem with musical instruments, it's because we all have been conditioned based on the way we've always worshiped. Let's just understand that. We've all been conditioned that way based on the way we've always worshiped. So we can't say a person's not sincere, okay? And what you have to understand is that if somebody is not looking, if somebody does not understand that there's a problem, do you think they're really going to be looking for the problem? That's what you have to understand. And see, what we have to understand is, so that's very understandable. Where it really becomes not understandable is when people recognize that there's an issue, but still have not taken the time to try to see what the scriptures say. You see, that's the dangerous part. If a person does not know and not see a problem, they're not looking for it. But when the conversation is taking place among different people that are both professing to be disciples of Jesus Christ, and nobody's checking it, then think about that. That's where the problem comes up. So the reason I bring this up because I make statements, and when I make statements, I don't make these statements for shock value. I make these statements based on taking the time to do it. Now, here's the thing. I realize that there's a lot of people that can quote a whole lot of verses to try to justify one way or another. But here's what I do know. Whether you remember the Church of Christ or whether you've been a member of a church who actually doesn't have any problem with musical instruments at all, what I do know is that I have never met anybody else other than a few people that have taken the time to read every single scripture that has any music in it. And the reason I'm saying that is for a reason. Is because a lot of times we make statements not understanding the totality of what the whole point is. If your whole point is to try to justify your position or what you want, then you're really not doing it any justice. If your whole goal is to understand what God has said, and your whole goal is to be submissive to what God says, then you understand what God is explaining to us. And so again, the subject matter is not necessarily scriptural music, but music of the scripture, because the point we want to make sure we understand is we want to look through all the scriptures. You see, the most important question that we should try to answer is how can we know without a shadow of a doubt that our worship is pleasing and acceptable to God? That should be the question that we're asking, okay? And seeing the debate over what is acceptable is a valid discussion, but this is not the core of this lesson. You see, how was it? Here's the question we need to ask. How was it that people of the Bible times knew the type of worship God wanted? Did they guess? Did they follow the lead of their personal taste of worship matters, especially worship matters? You know, did God provide clear guidance? See, these are the type of questions we need to answer if we're going to study music in the scriptures. You see, it's not you trying to prove your position, but being able to go back and look at everything and see where we got, how we got to this point that we are right now. The whole goal is for everyone to take the time to look. And see, the reason I'm saying that I'm not going to be taking questions just yet, because what I don't want to do is take it down a line before you had a chance to hear it, okay? Or before you had a chance to look at it. Because a lot of times we'll make a statement, and we'll make a statement in front of everybody that's going to be looking at this, and then we're going to go back and we're going to look at something, and all of a sudden you realize your statement was not valid as you thought it was. And now it makes it look like the Church of Christ doesn't know what they're talking about. So I'm asking us, let's put the time in. Let's put the time in when I give you paperwork to take home for you to read it, and then answer those questions. And when we get back together next time, we'll study some of these things. So the whole goal is to understand, the Bible. You see, the question comes up like this. Well, we don't believe that the New Testament authorizes instrumental music in worship. And then the rebuttal will be like, but the Old Testament is full of all kind of musical instruments. And then we'll say that may be true of the Old Testament. Now, here's the point I'm trying to make here. Unless you've taken time to look at all the scriptures in the New Testament, how can you make that statement? You see, you really can't. And you might be agreeing to something that you should not even be agreeing to. You see, one of the statements that I made before I left the last time to go out of town is I made a statement, here's was my position, just so we get this. And I didn't make this statement lightly, because I'm going to make this statement based on a person who's taken the time to read every single verse in the scripture that has to do with music. Write these things down, write the occasions down. And what happens is when I'm making these statements, what I try to explain is that when we're looking at music today, if your whole goal is to try to figure out how did they know for sure that what they were doing was pleasing to God, was it based on what they felt, thinking like, well, if we like it and it's enjoyable, then surely God must like it. And I know we don't say it that way, but my point I'm trying to make is that was at the standard, because here's what I need you to understand. What's going on today, and this is going to be one of those hard statements for people that are new to this. What's going on today in the churches today, I'm going to explain to you, you're going to see very plainly, it's not authorized in the Old Testament or the New Testament. And you're going to see it. And see, what we need to make sure we are understanding why because you have to understand this understanding has gone off so far that most people today don't even understand. Let me tell you what it is. The Church of Christ for a long time was the only group in modern days that stood themselves apart by not having instrumental music in worship. And one of the reasons why many people thought that we didn't actually have instrumental music is because we had no musicians or we couldn't afford one. Couldn't afford a piano. I'm going to give you a very good example here. I play guitar. Who else plays a musical instrument here? What do you play? Guitar. What do you play? Drums. Plays the drums, right? Anybody else play anything? Clarinet, right? Trumpet. So what you have done? My son's an excellent piano player. He was actually raised up as a kid in the church. Very good piano player. It didn't like we didn't have musicians, you know. But see, many people think that's the reason because we don't have the ability to afford something like that. You know, I'm hoping you as disciples of Jesus Christ, ones who adhere to the teachings of the scriptures, that's what a disciple actually is. I'm hoping your understanding is not that the only difference between us and other denominations is that they have a piano and we don't. If that's the only difference, we got a problem. So we need to make sure you understand when you understand what's actually happening here, because many churches of Christ today do not even understand this anymore. Because many churches of Christ, here's their solution. Well, and it's the sad part is that as elders, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually have a traditional worship at 11 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock, we're going to have the contemporary worship service, whereas unlike elders come up with ideas like that. Now, wait a minute. Aren't the elders supposed to oversee the spiritual well-being of the flock? What kind of solution is that? That by definition is division. And so what we need to do is take the time to look at it ourselves, to where I'm not telling you this, you're putting the work in so you can see these things yourself, okay? Now, here's what you have to understand. Here's the big dilemma. You understand that in the Old Testament, where the liturgy for worship, in many cases, included instruments of music. We cannot deny those things. So you see, what many of us would like to try to believe, that there was no instruments used in the scriptures all the way from Adam and Eve to now. Pull your head out of the sand. That's not true, okay? But you also need to understand that through all of that time, through the temple and many other items of worship we see in that, what you all of a sudden happen is, even with the big influence on Christianity from the teachings that preceded them, from the patriarchs or from the lawgiver Moses and from David and the king's reigns and all those things. When you look at all of that, here's one thing that all scholars of early church realized, that through all of those things, even they had all those instruments of worship in different fashions inside the Old Testament, why all of a sudden in the New Testament do you see them absent? And just so you get this, I always ask my friends who are, again, especially members in the church trying to justify it, I say, let me ask you a question. When I ask my friends who are Baptists, I say, hey, can you tell me when instrumental music got introduced into the Baptist church? What if I told you the Baptist church, when you actually go look at Joseph Smite, Sturgeon was one of those ones that said, you know, I wish to God that there was not the name Baptist named ever again on this earth, because he understood the problem with the division of it. But you have to understand that he made it very, very plain that it's not possible to worship God with a mechanical instrument. Martin Luther said the exact same thing. And so we have to understand is that you realize that instrumental music did not get introduced into Christian, I'm using that loosely, Christian worship until about 600 years ago. Nobody did it. Everybody did it the way we do it. That's right. But it wasn't until 600 years ago that it changed. But let me take you one step further. It started getting introduced into worship long before that. But guess who did it? The Catholic Church. But nobody followed, but everybody was protesting the Catholic Church, but it didn't catch on until like the 15th century. So I asked that very simple question. Here's the big dilemma that biblical scholars have to try to explain to their students the difference here. They have to try to explain, what was it, even though the Christian faith is heavily influenced by Judaism and the teachings of the old law, what was it that made all the instruments go silent? Why did everybody understand this? Matter of fact, do you understand one of the oldest definitions for the word a cappella? To sing a cappella? You know what one of the oldest definitions you'll see in a dictionary 100 years old? It means to sing like a church. It means to sing like a church. Now, isn't that an interesting statement? So what I'm trying to get us to understand is that I want to try to help us understand what happened and what we're going to do. And that's the reason we're not looking for scriptural music, because we always think scriptural music is what we should be doing now. We're going to look at music in the scriptures. So we have to take the time to look and accept some things just so we can see the whole picture also. So do you understand the goal? We need to ask the right questions. You see, to say that the Old Testament is full of all kind of musical instruments, you know, what we have to understand is that may be a true statement, but that is not a complete statement. You see, the fact that the statement that the Old Testament is full of all kind of musical instruments gets said so much that many people never even contest whether or not there's a whole lot of musical instruments in the Old Testament or not. And what we want to do is take the time to see. While this may be true that there are musical instruments in the Old Testament, the response is not complete unless you know exactly what was actually used. So you can make that statement whether or not it's full of all kind of musical instruments or not. You understand what the goal is? You see? So we need to understand something. Things can be accurate, but also can be misunderstood. You can say something accurate and be misunderstood. You remember when Peter says in Matthew, when Jesus asked Peter in Matthew chapter 16, he said, "But who do you say that I, the Son of Man, am?" He said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Right? Now, Peter made that statement very, very accurately, that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay? And so, even though that was true, what we know based on what Peter did even after that point helps us understand that Peter did not truly understand the statement that he just made. Because Peter still failed miserably, even though he knew that he was the Christ, the Son of the living God. But what did Peter have? What did Peter have that we can learn from him? You see, what we can see that even though Peter made a statement that was absolutely true, he really did not understand the significance of that statement. But fortunately, Peter continued to ask questions, and he struggled with the answers. Anytime Jesus was giving Peter answers, Peter struggled with answers. Remember, we kind of talk about, well, how many times should we forgive, Lord, right? Here's the Lord telling him these things. When the Lord, he said, "Thou art the Christ, Son of the living God," right? And then right after that, Jesus started explaining to Peter, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to have to be taken. I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to be crucified and everything. He said, "No, Lord, that can't happen." He said, "You're the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." And God is telling him how things are going to be, and he's struggling with it. But he's still asking the questions. You see, because once he figured it out, he stood strong. And see, what we need to make sure is we take the time, even though we may struggle with some of the things that are being said, even though we can make a true statement, we need to make sure we're asking the right questions. Not so we're just proving to somebody else how smart we are and proving to someone how we can win a debate. The whole goal is not to win a debate. The whole goal is to save your soul and anybody else that's looking to the Lord for refuge. That is our goal. Amen. You see, and so we need to make sure we understand what we're talking about before we try to put ourselves out there as the all-knowing person when it comes down to this. Now, I don't profess to know everything. But I do believe that God does know everything. So since it's not possible, since we can make true statements and still not understand the magnitude of what we're saying, the likewise statement, the New Testament offers practices. Listen to me now. The New Testament worship practices are different from the Old Testament worship practices. That's one thing we can all agree on. They are different. Okay. And see, that is a true statement. Okay. And what we have to understand is that they're different from the Old Testament worship practices is a true statement and may very well suggest a divine directed distinction. So the New Testament worship is unlike its Old Testament predecessor in many ways. But here's a question you have to ask yourself. However, how many of us would agree with the statement that the Old Testament worship is exactly like the New Testament? Nobody believes that. But what about this? Which Old Testament worship are we talking about? Now, this is one thing we never even considered here. You see, in the Old Testament, you have to ask yourself this question. Are we talking about the worship of the patriarchs? Are we talking about the worship under Moses? Are we talking about the worship under the king of like David? Now, what are you talking about, Brother Hal? Oh, they were all different. You understand what I'm saying here? They were all different. And yet we're all calling those things the Old Testament. But they were all different. And these are things we're going to see. We also have to understand that in the Old Testament, we even see worship to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's idol. So what Old Testament worship are we talking about? We got to be specific here. You see, these were all considered Old Testament types of worship. And so when we have completed this lesson, we will have a better knowledge of music worship practices in both the Old and the New Testaments. And then we'll be better equipped to continue to search for those forms of worship that is pleasing to our Lord today. Once we had a chance to see those distinctions, so we're not making blanket terms, throwing things out that blanket, never checking these things for ourselves. Okay? Now, I do have to talk about a few other things to help us to understand how we're going to get to where we are right now. Okay? You see, I have to go on these tangents just so you understand that there are certain things we need to get to. You see, there's differences between the music of the tabernacle and of the temple. And we're going to take a closer look at those things between the tabernacle and the temple. And we're going to ask some questions that are seldom asked. Okay? We also have to look at the influence on worship. And we need to make a brief study of the institution of the monarchy of Israel. In other words, one of the main talking points when it comes down to David being an innovator and the monarchy of Israel, how the worship actually changed. And so we have to go on certain tangents to even understand the monarchy and how the monarchy changed worship in the Old Testament. Okay, another thing we have to talk about is music in the scriptures. Again, we're going to see certain words in the English language, but where many people get tripped up at is not understanding that when you're looking at translating a language into another language, you're trying to get the literal meaning of something. Sometimes we miss some very important points. So here are the words, if you ever get a chance to use, who has a Strong's Concordance? You get a Strong's Concordance, and here's one of the things you're going to look at, okay? There's 3 words we're going to look at that you're going to be able to look up in the Strong's Concordance in the Hebrew, and one of those words is zamar. Okay, let me show you this. Because sometimes we'll make a stand on something that's somebody who knows the scriptures is going to be able to knock us down on, okay? The word zamar means to make music or to sing praises, okay? The word does not of itself include or exclude instruments of music, okay? We need to make sure we understand that. So a lot of times we'll see sing praises, but then we'll also see a musical instrument tied along with it. So if you're thinking that sing praises means that it doesn't include instruments, if it's this word zamar, then it does not include or does not exclude in and of itself. You have to look at the actual verses to get the context of it, okay? The next word we're going to look at is nagan, which means to play. That specifically means to play an instrument. That is not used with your voice. It means to play, okay? And then you're going to look at the word shir, which specifically means to sing, meaning it does exclude instruments. And just like to play does not talking about singing, this word here does not in and of itself include or exclude musical instruments. So here's what we have to do. I'll give you an example just so we can see what I'm talking about here. If you look, for example, at Psalm chapter 33 and verse number 2. Psalm 33 and verse number 2. We'll look at verse number 2. Okay? It says, praise the Lord with harp. Sing unto him with psaltery and an instrument of 10 strings. Sing unto him a new song. Play skillfully with a loud noise. Okay? The word in that sentence is zamar. And you see sing in there and you see play in there. That's the way that word is actually used. Okay? Now, just so we get this, you actually see similar passages in Psalm 71 and 22, 98 and 5, 144 and 9. Don't have to worry about this just now because I'm going to give you a handout in a second, okay? Psalm 147 and 7, Psalm 149 and 3. Now, here's what we have to understand. In many cases, there's a parallel structure of the verse. And the way to figure out what it means or what it equates to is looking at the verse, what it has in it. Because just because it says sing, if it just says sing praises, if it has nothing else there, then you can imply that it means just singing, okay? But if it has sing praises and it has another instrument there, or if it has playing an instrument and it says giving thanks, then it lets you know it's still both things that are happening, all right? That's the way you figure out the context of that. And so here's what you have to understand. Of the 47 times that zamar is used in the Old Testament, only 10 occasions clearly include the use of musical instruments. 10 occasions out of 47 times it's actually used. Now, that's a very interesting conversation when you look at it, considering how many times that is actually used and how many times musical instruments are tied into it. You see, this right here does not include singing, and this never includes musical instruments. So what we're going to see here is that when you start to look at the entirety of it, you're going to realize, oh, there's musical instruments in it, but it's not always used the way we thought it was actually going to be used, okay? Then we have to understand there's also different families of instruments. There's wind instruments, there's string instruments, and there's percussion instruments. So the wind instruments, we'll see that these are things that are sometimes translated in different versions of the scriptures when you read it. You'll see a flute, you see a pipe, you see organ, you see oboe. Now, when you see the word organ there, that is not like a big Lowry organ with the pedals and stuff like that. That's not what that's talking about. All it is a series of pipes that the only thing they have in common with an organ today is that the music is made when wind is blown through it. But it wasn't no electricity back then. It wasn't no big pumps back then. You were blowing in it. That's what an organ is and when it's done that way. So that would be considered a wind instrument, an instrument that made noise with a wind. That's not all wind instruments, though, because one instrument that you're going to see in the scriptures that's a wind instrument, but has not one time from the beginning of the book all the way to the Revelation is a trumpet. A trumpet in the scriptures. You need to hear this, everyone. A trumpet in the scriptures is not used one time as a musical instrument. Trumpets in the scriptures every single time was used as a signal instrument. Let me help you understand what I'm talking about. When you understand the word trumpet that's actually used, you'll see it used two ways. You'll see trumpet that is a metal trumpet. You'll also see a cornet or a shofar. If you go to the MIM Museum to this day, you can go to MIM Museum and you can see what's called a shofar, which is actually a ram's horn that has been hollowed out to make a trumpet, to blow. Now, you have to understand it wasn't until about the 1800s that the trumpets we have today start getting valves put in it to where you can play different notes. Yeah. That's a pretty new instrument. Anytime in the Bible you see the word trumpet, even when it's actually tied in to worship, it was never used as an instrument of music. It was used as an instrument to call people together, as a warning to go to war. So when you see trumpet in the scriptures, even though it's a wind, what we would call a wind instrument, it wasn't a musical instrument. Not one time in the scriptures is it used that way, and you're going to see that. Because every time we see trumpet, you're going to see like, oh yeah. Because I know a lot of times people want to count a trumpet. Trumpet's in there a whole lot of times. But a trumpet not one time is used as a music. Who knew that? That in the scripture, the trumpet is not used one time as a musical instrument.
Well, I knew it was, like you said, the wood, call, but it's
never used as a musical instrument. That's something that, we made something different today that actually does that. So I just want us to understand the different types of musical instruments. Next, you're also going to see musical instruments in the scriptures. You're going to see stringed instruments, okay? Now, the stringed instruments, you're going to see like the harp, or you're going to see like the lyre. If you actually have a certain Bible, you're going to see the psaltery, okay? You're going to see the lute, okay? Does anybody know the difference between a harp and a lute or a lyre?
Size for size?
It's not size. It's not a size thing at all. A harp is just a frame of strings. A lute or a lyre actually has a sounding board with a hole in it to sound the noise out of it, like an old time banjo or something. It has a little hole in it with the little gourd body on it. Okay? You need to understand what these instruments are. So you'll see these stringed instruments that are actually listed. And you're also going to see percussive instruments. Now you'll see things like a tambourine, or you'll see like timbrel or a treble or something like that. And what you have to understand is those are the things that you do see. But here's what's very interesting here, and I want to put this out there. Even though we see all these listings of instruments here, the simplest and most ancient percussive instrument, the drum, is surprisingly absent from all biblical references of music. There is no drum in the Bible. Now let me tell you what's interesting about that. Is that, again, if you go to the MIM Museum, you can actually see all these different instruments from all these different time periods and all these different places. And even where you can see the shofar and all these other instruments, you can see that there were actually drums at that time. But isn't it interesting that there's no reference to a drum, not one time in the Bible, Old Testament or New Testament?
Isn't the timbrel, isn't that a drum?
No. We're not talking about a drum. You're talking about something that just rattled, a couple pieces of metal that rattled. This was not a drum. You have to go back and look at these things, okay? Now, you thinking of a tambourine like we have today with the skin drawn across it? No, that's not the same thing, okay? What I tell people is take the time, just like you're thinking an organ. No, it's not the same thing. What's interesting about the MIM Museum is that you can go and you can look at all these different instruments that are collected from all these different parts of the world, and even up and down the Galilean coast, and even in Israel and all these places. So you can see these things. But what I'm trying to explain to you, every single culture that I know of, most cultures I know of, whether you're looking at the Asian, whether you look at the African, what we call the African, the European, or the Native Americans, or whatever, every single culture has a drum. That's the most ancient instrument across the board. I can't think of any other instrument that every society has. But it's noticeably different, it's noticeably absent in the Bible. There is no drum in the Bible. None. And so I always tell people, isn't that kind of interesting though? That there is no drum? I always try to tell a person, like, think about this for a second. If you say you're going to use the Bible, even if you have musical instruments that are similar in a lot of ways, show me the authorization anywhere for a drum. See, nobody ever has that conversation. See, that's the time when you can make a person think, okay, how do you authorize a drum then, Old Testament or New Testament? Is it fair to say that the drum is very commonly used in churches today? Where's the authorization, Old Testament or New Testament? And once we get a chance to look at what the Old Testament, and when it comes down to the way that people decided what instruments were going to get played, your eyes are going to be open to something that you weren't ready for, I don't think. And so, again, those are some of the things we want to make sure that we understand ahead of time as we take the time to look at the scriptures. Now, with that in mind, David, if you would help me really quickly. Let's see how far we can get on this. I need you to hand out one of these to everybody. I may have enough for everybody here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 21, 26, 17, 18. I got 17 there. So, yeah, hand them out to, if it's a husband and wife, just grab one. But everybody else gets one. I can do more, but I did 17. Now, here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to do a very quick analysis of the Pentateuch, or the Torah, of the 5 books of law. And what we're going to do tonight, believe it or not, before we leave here today, we're going to look at every single verse in the 5 books that have to do with music in the first 5 books of the Bible. So you understand what we're going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to move very, very quickly on it. Let me help you out with part of that, David, because I want to make sure we get there kind of quick there. That's okay. So, quickly, y'all help David pass them out so I can get the point. I got 19 minutes, and I want to show us these things. Okay. Now, just so I show by hands, very, very quickly by hands, who does not want to read tonight? Who does not want to read tonight? Okay, so I know you can't. So everybody else is willing to read? Really good then. So Now, when you look at this, we're going to analysis of it. So what you have on the left column, you see all the different verses that are written there. Okay? This is all the verses in the Bible that have anything to do with instruments. Okay? Across the top, you're going to see how I'm categorizing this. In other words, if it has anything to do with secular music, we're going to mark secular on it. If it's praise, we're going to mark praise. If it's a signal instrument, like if it's a trumpet, we're going to put it's a signal. If it's an other instrument, anything other than a trumpet, we're going to put other instrument. And then if there's no instrument, we're going to mark no instrument. You understand what we're doing? Everybody got a pen or a pencil? Yes? All righty. So to get us started, we're going to do this in the order that it's on here. So you can make yourself ready. You should not be waiting. After we read, you should have it marked down and be ready looking at the next one. So I'll start it off in Genesis chapter 4 and in verse number 21. Now, this is actually talking about Adab bare Jabal in verse number 20, and his father was such as dwell in the tents and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such that handled the harp and the organ. Now, and also he was an instructor in these things. Now, what you have to understand is when you actually look at this particular case, this is not talking about go back and study these things. This particular case is not talking about worship at all. It's just talking about a person who had the sons that were very good musicians. Okay, and so this particular case is being secular, and it's talking about other instruments. So you put an X under secular and other instruments. Okay. Or if you want to, you can actually just write the instruments down that were actually used, however you want to do that, under other instruments. So you understand what we're going to do here, right? Now, Genesis chapter 31, verse number 27, Cecilia.
21 and 7?
Genesis chapter 31 and 27. It's on your paper. Everybody looking, matter of fact, you should be looking ahead when your row is coming. Okay? Genesis 31, verse number 27. What does the Bible say?
Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, and with tabret, and with harp? So
this is when Jacob was trying to run away with his wife from Laban, his father-in-law, right? And then Laban says, why'd you try to take off secretly, man? I'd have threw you a big old party and everything, right? And we could have had a good time, and we could have had sang and played the tabret. That's your little percussion thing for your fingers, and the harp. So here's the question: is that secular or praise? Secular. So that's secular. And then were there instruments mentioned? Yes. So put other instruments. Exodus chapter 15. Beginning in verse number 1, okay? Now, what I want us to do is Diane, when you start reading, I'm not going to have you read all of it, but when you start reading the first few verses, you're going to understand what's actually happening here. Go ahead.
Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he is become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war, the Lord is his name. Various chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. His chosen captains also are drowned in the Red Sea.
Now, y'all remember this story? So here's what actually happened. Here it is that children of Israel walked through the Red Sea, made it to the other side, and when Pharaoh's army followed, they got drowned, right, in the sea. Moses led the men in this song, and they were all singing this song. And later on, we're going to see the women respond. But what you have here is you have Moses and the men singing praises to God. Now, here's the question before we go any further. What we're going to see here is if you go through to verse number 18, you're going to see the only thing they did was sang. All right? All they did was sang. And was it praises? Yes. So it's praises. And there were no instruments mentioned here. Now, you're going to have to go back and verify that. There's no instruments, but you're going to see something happen in a minute. Now, here's the question you have to ask yourself. Why do you think they sang that song? Did God command them to sing that song? No. Why did they sing it? Huh? It's just not just a song of remembrance. What had just happened? They were just happy. Man, this was like, oh yes, they just praising God because it was spontaneous. Something that natural would happen to you when you actually came out of that. It wasn't something God commanded. It was spontaneous praise. And so it wasn't anything that God commanded. It's something that would happen natural when you've been delivered like that. You know, you'll be singing praise and be thanking God automatically an occasion like that, right? But we're also going to see something else here. If you look at beginning in verse number 20 and 21 of Exodus chapter 15, read 20 and 21, Bridget.
And Miriam, the prophetess and sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels.
Timbrels.
Okay, and with dances. And Miriam answered them, "Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider have he thrown into the sea."
So you see that Moses leads the men in singing, right? And then the Bible says that Miriam and the women answered them. And what they did is they responded by singing the same thing that they just barely sang. But they played the timbrels. The women played the timbrels and they danced, right? So what do we have here? Was it praise? Yes. Was there instruments used? Yes. Okay, so put other instruments on that. And again, this is one of those things where it's an occasion of spontaneous praise because they're just glorifying God because they just barely got delivered. It wasn't some God that actually told them to do, but it would come natural to you if God delivered you like that. That'd be expected of you, okay? Now, Exodus chapter 19 and verse number 13. These are stories we know, and so we're going to be able to get the answer to this one very, very quickly. Exodus chapter 19 and verse number 13, Pam?
There shall not an hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man. It shall not live when the trumpet sounded long. They shall come up to the mountain.
So here it is Moses is going to meet with God up on the mountain, and you got to remember the sight that was there. You got the thundering and the lightning and all this other stuff. The people are scared. And God said, don't let nobody touch the mountain, right? But when you hear the trumpet blare long, then you approach the mountain. Was that a musical instrument? Was the trumpet telling them what to do and when to do it? It was a signal. So go ahead and write signal. Go ahead and mark as a signal. Okay? Now, Brother Ross, read verse number 16 now of the same chapter.
It came to pass on the third day of the morning that there was thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and the voice of the trumpet exceeded loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled.
All right. Again, we're still talking about the same occasion. Was it a musical instrument or was it the trumpet sounding as a signal? Signal. Okay. Verse number 19, Sister Ross.
And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice.
Again, it's the same occasion. Still a signal. Exodus chapter 20 and verse number 18. Sister Loretta.
And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off.
So we still got another what? Signal. All righty. Here's an interesting one here. Exodus chapter 32, verse 17 through 19. James.
And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. And he said, it is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear.
Now watch what's actually happening. Go ahead and keep reading.
And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot. And he cast the table out of his hand and brake them beneath the mountain.
What was happening here? Huh? What was happening here? What's this occasion right here? Yeah, but what's the story about? When Moses coming down off the mountain and the people are all dancing, right? And singing, right? right? And they had the golden calf, right? Now, here's what you have to understand here. Now, think about this for a second. That was not secular. That was worship to a false god. That was praise to a false god. So write down that's praise on there. Now, even though it's not mentioned, sister, think about the occasion. Would you be surprised if there was instruments being used at that time when the party's going on like that? Because you said that they were dancing and all kind of stuff. Who dances to music that's not there except 13-year-old girls? You know, they dance all the time anyway. You see what I'm saying? So I would not, even though it's not mentioned there, I would not be surprised if it was some kind of musical instrument going on, because that was a big old party happening, right? But we do need to recognize this. This is not secular what's happening here. Shemaine made a very good point when he talked about this occasion, because their whole goal was, they said, tomorrow shall be a celebration unto the Lord. For these gods have brought us out of Egypt. They were worshiping that false god. So that's not secular. Make sure you write that. That was praise that was happening. Even though it was actually not in the right place, that was still praise. Okay? Leviticus chapter 23, verse number 24. Liz?
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation.
All righty. The blowing of trumpets. This is a signal. It's a signal. Leviticus 25 and verse number 9. Sarah?
Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, in the day of atonement. Shall you make the trumpet sound throughout all your land.
What type of music was that? Signal. All righty. Numbers chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. And we're not going to read all of it here, but I want us to go back. Make sure you go back and read all of this, but we'll get this pretty quickly. Okay? Numbers chapter 10, verses 1, and just keep going until I say stop. Okay? Lynette?
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, make these 2 trumpets of silver. Of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the adjourning of the camp. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to be at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation.
Sister, have you figured out what he's talking about already? So notice what he says here. He's given instructions on these trumpets of how they need to be made. What did he say the trumpets be made for? When they're blown, what happens? People know when to assemble. They know. So this is why I try to explain to you that the trumpets were used as a signal. They were never used for calling people. They were not musical instruments at all. Okay? So again, this is actually for a signal, right? Numbers chapter 21, verse number 17. Quint? Yeah, Quint. Yeah.
Then Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well, sing ye unto it.
Now, you know what? I need you to back up a couple of verses and then just read that again. Go back 2 verses.
And at the stream of the brooks that goes down to the dwelling of Ar, and lieth upon the border of Moab, and from thence they went to Beer, that is the well whereof the Lord spake unto Moses, gather the people together, and I will give them water. Then Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well, sing ye unto it.
So remember the story where God delivered them with water out of the rock.
Right.
And their response to that water, the response was, spring up, oh well. Now, here's the point. Now, when you go back and you look at it, if I had to ask you, what type of music is this? It's praise. I would say it's praise. But think about it for a second. Were they singing to God or did they sing to the rock? They sang to the rock. Spring up, oh well. They sang to the water, right? Now, here's the point I want to make on this one. You know, you'll see this throughout the scripture also. This will be what we would call a folk song. It's a song that's tied into the works of the Lord, but they're really not singing directly to the Lord. They were singing to the rock, spring up, oh well. Now, I would say it's praise. You know why? Because that rock that followed them in the wilderness was Christ. That's what Paul said. But at that particular time, they probably didn't understand that. What they were doing, they were praising, they were glorifying because they had the water. So I would say it was actually praise. That would be considered praise. But were there any instruments mentioned? No. Okay. Numbers 29 and verse number 1. Sister?
And in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work. It is a day of blowing the trumpets unto you.
All righty. Again, what is that? That's a signal. Numbers 31 and verse number 6, Brother Warren.
And Moses sent them to the war, and 1,000 of every tribe, them and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, to the war with the holy instruments and the trumpet to blow in his hand.
All right. They're going off to war. What do you think that's about with the trumpets? It's a signal. Okay. And the final one here is going to be Deuteronomy chapter 31. Now, we're going to cover some of these things. And what I got a misprint on the bottom of that. You see Deuteronomy chapter 31, you see verse number 19, verse number 30. But then the 32 means all of chapter 32. Why? Because God is actually giving Moses some instructions about teaching the people this song. And then verse number 32, chapter 32 is the song. So you need to read the whole song to see what it's about. So Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse number 19, Sister Lynn.
Okay, now therefore write you this song for you, and teach it the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel.
All righty. Aubrey, read verse number 30 of the same chapter. Deuteronomy 31, verse number 30. Okay, Charmaine.
And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of the song until they were ended.
All righty. Now in chapter 32 gives you the words of the song. He told them to teach, he commanded Moses to teach Israel this song, to remind them of what I've done for them, but also remind them of how they rebelled against me and how they didn't appreciate me and all these things. So he told them this song. Now, when you go read that whole song in chapter 32, even when you see the instructions in 31, he told them to teach this song that they be able to remember it and to sing it. So it is praise to God, but there is no instruments mentioned. Now, we've gone through every single verse in the first five books of the Bible. Have you ever did that before? No. So now you actually have a list of every single verse in the first five books of the Bible that has anything to do with music. Now here's what we have to summarize here, okay? The summary is that it's easy to see the music of the official worship as prescribed by Moses in the law. And the reason being is because there was none prescribed by Moses in the law. When it comes down to the liturgy, meaning where the worship that is actually put together to where it's a direction for organized worship, okay? The only one we see is in Deuteronomy chapter 31. Now let's go back and look at what we have here. We actually have other occasions of praise, but see, when you actually look at the first occasion we saw praise, that was something that happened spontaneous, right? God did not command it. The next one we see of praise is when people are worshiping the golden calf. And I wouldn't doubt that there was instruments, even though they're not listed, but do you want to use that as an example to praise God at all? Because they were trying to tie it into the worship of God, but you can't tie that into the worship of God, okay? Also, you see signals here. We'll also see in Numbers chapter, and in Numbers 21, we actually had another occasion of praise, right? That did actually have no instruments, but only one do you see commanded by God, that God would teach them, that Moses was commanded to teach, and it was to teach them a song. And he mentioned no instruments at all. So there's your first 5. All righty? Now, most of the handouts I'm going to give you are going to be like that, to where you're going to take the time to look at each verse, and then you're going to write down what you see. Okay? So if I give you this paper today, who's going to do the homework and bring it back and not say, hey, can you give me another one in papers because I forgot mine at home? And what? I'm not doing this time, guys. I'm not printing 15 this time and then 14 the next time we get together because nobody brought it back. If you know you ain't going to bring it back, don't take one. Does anybody want the paper?
Yes, I do.
All right, really good then. David, if you would, make sure everybody gets one of these while we get the announcements here. All righty? This one's a little different. What you're going to do is you're going to take the time to read the verses and they'll go around it, and you're going to figure out what the event was about. Why was this actually happening? What was the event where this music took place? Like in Joshua chapter 6, verses 4 through 20, the event is Jericho, okay? The wall of Jericho. And then we're going to see what type of music was there. Whether it was actually vocals, if it was vocal, people singing. You see sing, put vocals. If you see an instrument, write the instrument down that you saw, okay? But write down the occasion. And you'll have to put the reading in to get the context. You understand what we're doing now? So when we show up next week, we should be able to go through this very, very quickly. And I should be able to give you another handout. Okay. So the goal is, I think that I got about 10 handouts, and we'll have the whole Bible done. But I believe we can do more than one handout in one sitting. But there is the commentary along the way. Okay. And I'm asking you to remember the things that I told you, because what we have to understand is, we have to go back and look at the context of what they were doing to see how they knew what they should have been doing. And if it was not a command by God, what was the occasion? To see if it made sense. Because you'll see something different in each occasion. Just so you get this, when it comes down to worship of Moses, as far as the liturgy being commanded, to when you gather together how to worship, you only have one verse, and that's the last one we saw. You don't have any other. So you don't see many more instruments until you see the David come on the scene. Let me help you understand what I'm talking about. You're talking about like 300 to 500 years pass before you start seeing instruments like David. I bet y'all didn't know that, did you? Hundreds of years passed and you see no references at all. Just so you understand that. So that's what I'm saying. When people say, well, what Old Testament practices are you talking about? Because the practices under Moses and also of the tabernacle, even before the temple, the practices under Moses, the practices under David in the tabernacle in the wilderness, or the tabernacle in the wilderness and the temple, they're all different. They're not all the same. So what Old Testament are we talking about? We're trying to justify this with. It's not all the same. Did you know that? It's not all the same, and you're going to see it's different. Anybody surprised that there's very little in the first 5 books of the Bible? You see, that's interesting. Just so you get what I'm talking about here, we read all of them. And do you realize we had to begin pretty much with almost to Moses? What are you talking about? When it comes down to praising God in the scriptures under the patriarchal age, you don't have one single verse. One single verse that had singing or playing, one single verse under the patriarchs that was offered to God in praise under the patriarchal age. Isn't that kind of interesting now? Yeah. All righty. Any questions, any comments? What's the question?
It says type of music.
I just barely answered that. When on the side it says, now what I did here is look. So I got the book of Joshua. I got X's there because you're not going to put anything on the blanks. Here's the verse. Write the event in. This event was the wall of Jericho. Write what type of music you saw there. If you saw singing, put singing. If you see a musical instrument, write what kind of musical instrument it was. That's what the type of music I'm talking about. All right? So it's going to be very simple. Write down what the occasion was, what was going on at that time. write down what kind of music it was. Vocal, write down vocal. If you see sing or sang or song, write down vocal. You know what that means. If you see the trumpet was blown, write down trumpet. If you see a timbrel was played, write down timbrel. You understand what we're doing? All righty. Now, I don't have any